Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, the story continues with a morning that seems peaceful at first glance, yet quietly sets in motion changes that slip into the fates of Hung and Hoai Ca in ways no one could have anticipated. That morning, the weather was warmer than usual. Fresh air spread throughout the space, carrying the lingering moisture of the long night before. A thin layer of mist drifted among the tall treetops, clinging to branches and leaves, obscuring the narrow paths that led deep into the forest. Early sunlight filtered through gaps in the foliage, falling onto the ground in broken streaks of light, fragile yet gentle. The forest seemed half asleep, silent and solemn, broken only by the distant calls of birds that pierced the stillness. Hoai Ca carried her old basket on her back. It had accompanied her on countless trips into the forest. The worn straps and scuffed bottom bore witness to years of hard, persistent labor. Her steps were slow but steady, familiar with every tree root and rocky outcrop. Each step required focus and caution in a forest full of the unpredictable. Today, Hoai Ca entered the forest with a very simple, almost fragile, hope, to find a few medicinal herbs to help those in need of treatment, to buy a little more time for fragile lives depending on those simple leaves and roots. But the forest was not generous that day. In this season, medicinal plants were scarcer than ever. Some vines were still lush and green, their young leaves vibrant, yet when dug up, there were no roots beneath. Other plants that once held great promise now had rotting roots, victims of seasonal shifts and harsh changes silently borne by nature. Hoai Ca moved from one tree to another, her eyes unable to hide a trace of regret. Each time she discovered a plant she could not harvest, her heart sank slightly, yet she quickly steadied herself and kept going. She patiently observed, carefully marking plants that were not yet usable, reminding herself to return at a more suitable time. Her hands were stained with soil, sweat beaded on her forehead, but her gaze remained calm and focused. For Hoai Ca, gathering medicine was not merely a task, it was a responsibility, a belief that if one tried a little harder, the forest would not betray human sincerity. Time passed slowly in that vast green space until the sun rose higher and the mist gradually faded. At last, after many quiet hours of searching, Hoai Ca found a few precious medicinal herbs. Not as many as she had hoped, but enough to sustain the sick through this difficult time. She let out a quiet sigh of relief, carefully placing each herb into her basket as if cradling small yet priceless hopes. Before leaving the forest, she glanced back once more, her eyes carrying a hint of concern, as though the place still held something waiting for her in the days to come. While Hoai Ca moved silently through the forest, Hung continued his long days searching for his mother. The paths he had traveled seemed to multiply, yet the clues remained painfully faint. The prolonged silence became an invisible cord tightening around his mind day after day. At times, Hung felt utterly drained, not from physical exhaustion, but from the constant worry and unease gnawing at his spirit. Each morning he woke, asking himself whether anything would change today, or whether it would be just another day of waiting and disappointment. Then one day, when everything seemed to repeat itself as before, a stranger came to Hoai Ca's house. That person brought news Hung had been waiting for so long, news he had once feared he might never hear. The atmosphere inside the small house suddenly grew heavy. Each word was spoken slowly but clearly, striking like measured blows against Hung's tightly wounded heart. His mother was still alive. Just that single sentence was enough to leave Hung frozen for a long moment. He was told that she had once been beaten by bad people and left by the roadside in critical condition. At the fragile boundary between life and death, she had been fortunate to receive help, cared for with simple yet remarkably effective herbal medicines. Thanks to that devoted care, her health was now gradually recovering, slowly but surely. The story continued, but Hung could barely hear it anymore. His heart clenched for an instant, then suddenly burst open. After so many days of hopeless searching, so many sleepless nights living with overwhelming fear, he finally knew that his mother had not left this world. The surge of emotion left him speechless. In that moment, all exhaustion and pain seemed to settle, giving way to a faint yet powerful spark of hope, one that signaled turbulent paths still waiting ahead. Hung met the person who had saved his mother on a quiet, windless afternoon. The atmosphere around them grew heavy as the story slowly unfolded, detail by detail, unhurried, yet laden with weight. That person spoke of the early days after finding his mother in a horrific condition, bruises covering her frail body, clear signs of merciless beatings, her skin pale, her breathing so weak it seemed that even a moment's delay would have cost her life. There were nights when pain tormented her so badly she could hardly sleep. She curled up in the small house, drenched in sweat, her trembling hands clutching a thin blanket, enduring it all in silence. Although she had survived the immediate danger, his mother's health remained very fragile. Her steps were slow, her breathing still unsteady, and every change in the weather left her utterly exhausted. The rescuer said that what had kept her going until now was not only herbal medicine, but also an intense will to live, the desire to see her son again before it was too late. Hearing this, Hung lowered his head for a long time. He did not dare look up, afraid that if he did, all the emotions he had been suppressing would burst forth. Hung understood a painful truth he was forced to accept, for now, he could not bring his mother home. The debt owed to the criminal underworld still loomed like a blade hanging overhead. The moment his mother reappeared, danger would strike, not only at her, but also at those who were sheltering and protecting her. Thinking of that possibility weighed heavily on his heart. He would not allow himself to be selfish, no matter how desperately he longed to be by her side. In the end, he asked the person who had saved his mother to continue hiding her whereabouts, to care for and protect her for a few more days. Hung promised, with complete seriousness and determination, that he would soon settle everything, that he would resolve the remaining troubles so he could openly and safely bring his mother home. This promise was not spoken in haste, it was uttered slowly, like a vow he placed upon his own shoulders. When he left, Hung carried a deeply conflicted mix of emotions. There was undeniable relief, because at least his mother was still alive, still slowly recovering day by day. But alongside it was a heavy, gnawing ache, because he still could not be with her, still could not hold her hand as he had dreamed of for so many years. Each step away from that house felt slow and reluctant, as if an invisible thread were pulling him back, while reason forced him to keep moving forward. Elsewhere in the forest, Hoai Ca, having gathered the necessary medicinal herbs, did not rush to return. She followed another forest path, hoping to find one last herb that was still missing. This path was narrower, steeper, and slippery beneath a thick layer of decaying leaves. Tall trees blocked the light, making the surroundings darker than she had expected. In a single moment of carelessness, when her foot slipped on a damp rock, Hoai Ca lost her balance. She fell hard into a deep rocky cavern below. The sudden fall left her dizzy, her breath knocked from her chest. A sharp pain shot through her leg, spreading outward, forcing her to clench her teeth to keep from crying out. When she struggled to her feet, Hoai Ca realized the situation was more serious than she had thought. All around were steep, cold, slippery rock walls enclosing a narrow, pitch-dark space. Small winding passages twisted like a maze, unclear which led to an exit and which were dead ends. She took out her phone, only to face a terrifying reality: no signal. Her only connection to the outside world had been cut off. Darkness began to creep into every crevice as the forest slipped into late afternoon. Hoai Ca tried to follow each path, relying on the faint light filtering through cracks in the rocks to find a way out. But every route she attempted ended at another cold stone wall. Time passed, natural light fading more and more, leaving behind a dim, oppressive space. Finally, as her strength ran out, Hoai Ca was forced to sit down. She leaned her back against the icy rock wall, breathing hard from pain and exhaustion. In that moment, she struggled to steady herself, reminding herself to stay calm, to conserve her phone's battery, to think carefully about every next step. In the silent, dark confines of the cavern, Hoai Ca could only cling to a fragile hope that she would find a way out before it was too late. At home, Hung called Hoai Ca again and again. Each call faded into hopelessness, leaving only long, unanswered ringing tones that ended abruptly, cold and haunting. He tried calling again, switched to video calls, then sent message after message, but none received a response. The house, once so familiar, suddenly felt strangely empty. There were no familiar footsteps on the porch, no gentle voice coming from the kitchen. The prolonged silence became a heavy void that left Hung deeply unsettled. Tony came home from school. The boy stood at the doorway, his clear eyes gazing down the small road in front of the house, the road where every afternoon Hoai Ca would appear with a basket on her back and a gentle smile. Today, that road was empty. Tony waited, looking outside and then back inside, as if hoping that with just a little more patience, his mother would appear. Hung watched his son, his heart tightening. He didn't know what to say, so he simply ruffled Tony's hair and told him to go inside first. Darkness slowly fell. The lights in the house were turned on, pushing away the darkness outside but making Hoai Ca's absence even more apparent. Time crawled by, every minute and second heavy and endless, while Hoai Ca remained completely unreachable. Night fell, and Hung barely slept. He sat by the window, his back against the cold wooden frame, his eyes fixed on the dim yard outside. Every small sound in the night made him startle. The wind rustling through the trees, the chirping of insects, even the sound of dry leaves hitting the ground was enough to make his heart race. Inside Hung, a growing sense of unease took hold, impossible to shake off. Every passing minute felt like an hour, and the longer he waited, the stronger his bad feeling became, clinging to him like a silent warning he was afraid to face. Elsewhere, deep in the silent forest, Hoai Ca was also enduring a sleepless night. Darkness enveloped the narrow space around her, cold and suffocating. She tried to feel her way through the dim passages of the rocky cavern, each step guided only by the faint glow of her phone screen. Her aching legs made every movement difficult. The dull, spreading pain mixed with exhaustion, draining her strength rapidly. Hoai Ca struggled to find a way out, but the thick darkness and slippery rock walls repeatedly blocked her path. At times, she stopped and listened, hoping to catch some familiar sound from outside, but only silence answered her. When she became too tired, she was forced to sit down, her back pressed against the icy rock wall. She hugged herself tightly, trying to keep warm as the cold seeped into her body. In the darkness, Hoai Ca focused on steadying her breathing, telling herself to stay calm, to wait for daylight. The long night passed in fatigue and anxiety, each moment testing her endurance. As the sky began to lighten, the first faint rays of dawn slipping through the window, Hung made a decision. He knew he could not keep waiting any longer. There was no more time for hesitation or fragile hope. Hung quietly prepared his things, his movements decisive though his face showed clear tension. He woke Tony earlier than usual and took him to school while it was still barely light. Before leaving, Hung bent down to adjust Tony's backpack straps. That familiar gesture felt slower today, as if he wanted to hold on to the moment a little longer. He gave Tony a few brief instructions, his voice trying to remain calm, though his eyes could not hide the deep worry within. Tony looked up at his father and nodded obediently, unaware of the storm surging inside Hung's heart. After dropping Tony off, Hung did not return home. He paused for a moment, took a deep breath to gather his resolve, then headed straight into the forest, the place where Hoai Ca usually went to gather herbs. A long night of waiting in vain was enough for him to understand that he could not delay any longer. Every step Hung took into the forest was heavy with anxiety, yet filled with determination. In his mind, there was only one thought: he had to find Hoai Ca, at all costs, before everything went too far. At the same time, deep within the forest still heavy with morning mist, Hoai Ca stirred slightly as the first rays of daylight began to filter faintly through the dense canopy above. The pale light was not enough to dispel the darkness surrounding her, but it was enough to awaken a fragile spark of hope after a long, exhausting night. She slowly opened her eyes, clearly feeling the dull, persistent pain in her legs, a reminder that yesterday's fall had not released its grip. Her body felt drained, every muscle aching, her throat dry from thirst and cold. But Hoai Ca knew that if she remained where she was, she would have no chance left at all. She clenched her teeth, pressed her hands against the cold stone floor, and gathered every last ounce of strength to force herself upright. Her legs trembled, unsteady, nearly causing her to fall once more. She leaned against the rock wall, took a deep breath, and struggled to steady herself. Every step now became a trial, painful and slow, but she refused to stop. The faint light guided her way, reflecting off damp stone surfaces and revealing narrow paths she could not see in the darkness of the night before. Though her body was close to collapse, Hoai Ca pushed herself onward, because in her heart there was only one thought left: she had to find a way out, even if it was only the faintest thread of hope. Elsewhere, within the same forest, Hung was moving forward with hurried steps, his heart weighed down by anxiety. He was searching in a state of overwhelming unease, each step into the forest feeling like a step deeper into his own fear. Every trail, every familiar patch of undergrowth was examined carefully, as if he might miss the smallest sign. Images of Hoai Ca filled his mind, unanswered questions piling up and making his urgency grow. He knew that time was now the most precious, and cruel, luxury of all. And Hoai Ca, alone in the depths of the forest after a sleepless night, continued her struggle. There were no human voices, no signs of life beyond the scattered calls of birds and the crunch of dry leaves beneath her feet. The silence pressed down on her, making each breath sound louder than ever. She stopped several times to catch her breath, her back resting against the rough bark of a tree, her eyes fixed on the growing light ahead. Every step was a battle against her own body, against exhaustion and the creeping fear seeping into her thoughts. Two people, moving in different directions, yet fate seemed to be quietly drawing them closer together. Two paths inching toward one another, slowly, silently, and filled with tension. The distance between them might now be just a few slopes, a few bends in the trail, or it might still be a fragile boundary between hope and despair. No one knew what truly lay ahead. Would they find each other before strength ran out? Would Hoai Ca's trembling steps be strong enough to carry her out of the forest? And would Hung arrive in time, before his fear turned into the reality he dared not imagine? Dawn had arrived. Light spread gradually across the forest, lifting the thin veil of mist that hid every path. Yet with that light, their fates also stood before an unavoidable crossroads. Every heartbeat, every breath now carried a tense anticipation, as if the entire forest were holding its breath, waiting for the answer about to be revealed. Would this search through the deep forest lead to a tearful reunion filled with relief? Or would it open the door to an even greater upheaval, testing everything they had fought so hard to protect?
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Cảm ơn mọi người đã theo dõi video của mình nhé. Mình đang buồn cười quá đi thôi. Tạm biệt mọi người.